Join me as I dive deep into the secrets of the werewolf cabal and try to expose their hidden truths once and for all. The concept of the werewolf cabal is shrouded in mystery, and yet it's a fascination that has captivated many for centuries. From folklore to conspiracy theories, this enigmatic group has been the subject of much speculation and intrigue. Many people think they know what a werewolf is. A creature from medieval legend, a monster from horror movies, or a figment of our collective imagination. But what if I told you that there's more to it than that? The idea of a secret cabal, a group of powerful individuals hiding in plain sight, controlling the narrative and pulling the strings from behind the scenes, is a notion that has been around for a while. We've all heard the myths. Werewolves are just medieval boogeymen, or perhaps they're just a metaphor for the darker aspects of human nature. But what if these myths are more than just mere fantasy? What if they're rooted in some sort of twisted truth? Another common misconception is that the idea of a secret society is just the realm of paranoid conspiracy theorists. But what if I told you that there are historical records of secret groups that have been operating in the shadows for centuries? In reality, the line between myth and reality is often blurred, and it's hard to separate fact from fiction. But that's what makes the werewolf cabal so fascinating. It's a reflection of our deepest fears and desires, a symbol of the unknown and the unexplained. Historical accounts of werewolves can be traced back to medieval Europe, where they were seen as a threat to the established order. In popular culture, they've been depicted as monsters, villains, or even heroes. But what's behind this fascination? Is it just a form of entertainment, or is there something deeper at play? The psychology behind the belief in werewolves is complex and multifaceted. It's a reflection of our collective psyche, a manifestation of our deepest fears and desires. It's a symbol of the unknown, the unexplained, and the uncontrollable. But what if I told you that there's more to it than just psychology or popular culture? What if there's a surprising connection, a thread that links the werewolf cabal to something much bigger, something that challenges our understanding of reality itself? One intriguing piece of evidence that has been circulating in the conspiracy circles is the alleged connection between the werewolf cabal and an ancient cult that worshipped a powerful, shape-shifting deity. It sounds like the stuff of fantasy novels, but what if it's true? Another piece of evidence that caught my attention was the testimony of an alleged ex-member of a secret society who claims to have witnessed some sort of ritual involving a human transformation into a wolf-like creature. It sounds like a wild claim, but what if there's some truth to it? The implications of this connection are mind-boggling. It would mean that the werewolf cabal is not just a myth, but a reality that has been hiding in plain sight for centuries. It would mean that our understanding of history, of human nature, and of the world around us is incomplete, if not entirely wrong. So, what have we learned so far? The werewolf cabal is not just a myth, but a complex web of folklore, psychology, and perhaps hidden truths. It's a reflection of our collective psyche, a manifestation of our deepest fears and desires. So, what do you think about the werewolf cabal? Do you believe it's just a myth, or is there some truth to it? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to explore more myths and conspiracy theories, be sure to check out my next video. Join me as I dive into the mystery of the USS Cyclops and see if I can uncover what really happened to this lost ship. In this video, we will explore the mysterious disappearance of the USS Cyclops, a naval cargo ship that has puzzled historians and enthusiasts alike. The central challenge revolves around understanding how a large ship could simply disappear in the Bermuda Triangle, an area infamous for maritime mysteries. For decades, the Bermuda Triangle has been associated with strange occurrences, from compass malfunctions to ghost ships. While many incidents can be chalked up to human error or natural phenomena, some remain unexplained, fueling the public's fascination with this enigmatic region. One of the most baffling cases is that of the USS Cyclops, a collier that vanished in 1918 while traveling through the Triangle. The ship's disappearance has sparked a flurry of theories, with no consensus on what actually happened. As we delve deeper into the mystery, it becomes clear that the truth behind the Cyclops' disappearance is far more complex than previously thought. Despite the numerous investigations and speculations, the Cyclops remains one of the greatest unsolved maritime mysteries of all time. The USS Cyclops was a massive ship, over 500 feet long, with a displacement of over 19,000 tons. It was assigned to the Naval Overseas Transportation Service, responsible for supplying American troops in World War I. On January 28, 1918, the Cyclops departed from Rio de Janeiro, bound for Baltimore, carrying a cargo of 9,000 tons of coal. The ship's crew consisted of 306 people, including passengers and crew members. What's striking is that no distress call was ever received, and no wreckage or debris was ever found, leaving investigators with a complete mystery. We'll delve into the background of the USS Cyclops, its mission, and the theories surrounding its disappearance, including possible weather conditions and navigational errors. The Cyclops sailed into a stormy weather pattern, which might have played a role in its disappearance. However, the ship was designed to withstand harsh conditions, and its experienced crew should have been able to navigate the treacherous waters. Some experts have pointed to potential structural flaws or mechanical failures that could have contributed to the ship's demise. But these theories don't fully explain why no distress call was sent or why no signs of the ship were ever found. Theories surrounding the Cyclops' disappearance range from the plausible to the paranormal. Some have suggested that the ship might have been a victim of German U-boats, which were active in the area at the time. However, no evidence of an attack has ever been found. Others have proposed that the ship might have experienced a catastrophic failure of its boilers or engines, causing a rapid sinking. But again, this wouldn't explain the complete lack of evidence. And then, of course, there are the more sensational theories, involving supernatural phenomena or even extraterrestrial activity. While these ideas might be intriguing, they remain purely speculative and lack concrete evidence. The most intriguing part of the story is the various theories proposed, from mechanical failure to supernatural phenomena, and what most experts believe to be the likely cause. While we might never know the truth behind the Cyclops' disappearance, most experts agree that the likely cause was a combination of factors, including harsh weather, human error, and possibly some structural flaws. The incident highlights the importance of safety protocols and regular maintenance in the maritime industry. It also underscores the need for continued research and innovation to improve our understanding of the complex interactions between human, machine, and environment. In summary, the USS Cyclops remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries, with no conclusive explanation for its fate, leaving us to wonder about its story. If you enjoyed this exploration of the USS Cyclops, be sure to check out our video on other unsolved maritime mysteries and share your thoughts in the comments below. Join me as I dive into the chaos of Donald Trump's fast food fiasco and see if I can recreate his infamous meal order. Donald Trump's fast food habits are a topic of endless fascination, and it's hard to understand why we're so drawn to it. Is it the curiosity about the behind the scenes of the most powerful person in the world? Or is it just the humor in seeing a billionaire surrounded by greasy burgers and fries? When we think about Donald Trump's fast food choices, one thing comes to mind: controversy. It's hard to believe that something as simple as a meal could spark so much debate, but Trump's affinity for fast food has raised eyebrows on both sides of the political aisle. One of the biggest criticisms is the concern about his health, with many questioning how a man in his 70s can maintain a diet so rich in processed foods. Additionally, some argue that Trump's fast food obsession reflects poorly on his image, giving off an air of unhealthiness and lack of sophistication. Another issue is the public perception of Trump's fast food choices. Many see it as a symbol of his everyman persona, an attempt to connect with the average American who indulges in the guilty pleasure of fast food every now and then. However, others view it as a crass display of wealth and privilege, with Trump seemingly flaunting his ability to afford any food he wants, no matter the nutritional value. It's also worth noting that Trump's fast food choices are often accompanied by a certain level of secrecy and exclusivity. There have been instances where he's brought fast food into the White House, sparking rumors about the cleanliness and safety of the food being served to world leaders. Donald Trump's love for fast food is well documented, with numerous public appearances and tweets showcasing his affinity for chains like McDonald's and KFC. One of the most infamous instances was when he welcomed the Clemson Tigers to the White House and served them a spread of fast food, complete with burgers, fries, and pizza. The event was met with both praise and ridicule, with some seeing it as a fun, light-hearted gesture, while others viewed it as a symbol of Trump's lack of refinement. Trump's fast food orders have also become a topic of fascination, with many trying to recreate his infamous meal. According to reports, Trump's go-to order is a quarter pounder, with cheese, no pickles, and a large fries. He's also been known to indulge in KFC's finger-licking good chicken, often requesting an extra-large bucket. The media frenzy surrounding Trump's fast food habits reached a fever pitch during the 2016 campaign, with many news outlets and late-night talk shows seizing on the topic. The hashtag #FastFoodPresident began trending, with memes and jokes flooding social media. The public reaction was just as mixed, with some defending Trump's right to eat whatever he wants, while others saw it as a symbol of his lack of discipline and responsibility. The controversy even sparked a national conversation about the role of food in politics, with many questioning whether a leader's eating habits should be subject to public scrutiny. In the end, Donald Trump's fast food habits are a reflection of his persona and public image: unapologetic, unconventional, and often controversial. So what do you guys think? Should politicians' eating habits be fair game for public critique, or should they be allowed to enjoy their favorite foods in peace? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to see more content about political controversies, be sure to check out my video on the most shocking presidential scandals in history.
The night was thick with fog, swallowing the small town of Eldridge in an eerie embrace. Sarah had always loved the mist, finding comfort in its cool, damp fingers wrapping around her as she walked home. Tonight, however, felt different. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that seemed to dance just out of the corner of her eye. She wrapped her coat tighter, quickening her pace. As she turned the corner, a chilling sound echoed through the fog, a low, mournful whisper that sent a shiver down her spine. "Help me," it called, a voice so close yet indistinguishable. Heart racing, Sarah followed the sound, compelled by a force she couldn't understand. The fog thickened, obscuring her vision until she stumbled upon an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like grasping hands. At its base lay a figure, pale and still. She knelt, feeling a sickening dread rise within her. The face was familiar, her own contorted in terror. Just then the whispers returned, growing louder. In that instant she understood. The fog wasn't just a veil, it was a harbinger. The townsfolk were right. Some nights, the fog reveals more than just shadows. It reveals the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves. Sarah stood in the dimly lit nursery, her heart racing as she listened. The soft, frantic cries of her newborn echoed from the dark corner where the cradle lay. She had just put the baby down and stepped out for a moment, but the cries had begun as soon as she turned her back. Her instincts screamed at her to check, but something held her back. A shadow flickered just outside the reach of the lamp's light, a silhouette that twisted and writhed as if alive. "It's just the wind," she whispered to herself, fighting the dread creeping up her spine. Yet the cries grew louder, more desperate. She took a deep breath and stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath her weight. As she approached, she noticed the cradle swaying gently, though no one was there. The cries morphed into a chilling laugh, echoing through the room, sending ice through her veins. "Help me, Mama," it begged, in a voice so eerily like her child's. Overcome with terror, Sarah yanked the cradle open. Empty, no baby, just a dark void where innocence should rest. The laughter echoed once more, and in that moment, she realized the cries were never from her child, but from something far worse that had taken its place. Every night as the clock struck midnight, Sophie would hear the familiar creaking of the floorboards beneath her bedroom. At first, she dismissed it as the house settling, but soon she began to question if she was truly alone. The sounds seemed to mimic footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing through the silence. One evening, driven by a mixture of dread and curiosity, she decided to investigate. Armed with only her phone's flashlight, she crept down the dimly lit hallway, each step causing the floor to groan under her weight. As she reached the living room, the air turned icy. The creaking intensified, now sounding as if someone, or something, was pacing back and forth above her. Sophie glanced up at the ceiling, the shadows seeming to twist and bend unnaturally. Panic surged through her as she realized the sound wasn't coming from above. It was beneath her. In a sudden burst of courage, she pulled up a loose floorboard, revealing a dark cavity below. What she found was a tattered diary, its pages yellowed with age. The last entry read, "I can hear them creeping closer. They know I'm here." Just then, the floorboard snapped shut on its own, trapping her hand. The creaking stopped, replaced by a whisper that sent chills down her spine. "Now you're one of us." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the decaying playground. Once vibrant with laughter, it now lay in eerie silence, the rusted swings swaying gently in the breeze. Sarah, an urban explorer, felt a chill creep up her spine as she stepped onto the creaking wood chips, their crunch echoing in the stillness. Suddenly, a soft giggle pierced the air. She froze, her heart racing, canning the deserted space. The laughter came again, light and playful, but from nowhere she could see. With each cautious step, the giggles grew louder, spiraling into maniacal shrieks that bounced off the crumbling slides and teeter-totters. Sarah's breath quickened. She turned to leave, but the laughter morphed into a haunting chorus, beckoning her back. A sudden cold breeze enveloped her, and she felt a presence behind her, a rush of movement. She spun around, eyes wide, but there was nothing. The laughter stopped, replaced by a chilling silence. In that silence, she realized the truth. These were not echoes of children playing. The playground was a graveyard of lost souls, and she was the newest player in their eternal game. As darkness enveloped her, the laughter returned, now sinister and triumphant. The old playground stood silent under the heavy sky, its swings creaking in the wind. Years of neglect had rusted the metal slides, but one could still hear the faint echoes of children's laughter on certain evenings. Emma, drawn by a childhood memory, ventured inside the gated enclosure, her heart racing with excitement and dread. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the cracked pavement. As she wandered, a chill crept up her spine. She stumbled upon a merry-go-round, its once vibrant colors now dulled by time. Curious, she gave it a push, and it began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, as if fueled by an unseen force. The laughter grew louder, a cacophony of joy twisted into something sinister. Emma stopped, breathless, as she saw shapes flickering in the corners of her vision, pale figures with hollow eyes watching. Panic surged through her. She turned to leave, but the exit had vanished, a thick fog enveloping the area. Whispers filled her ears, pleading and mocking. With a final surge of terror, she realized the laughter belonged to those who had come before her, forever trapped in this playground. As darkness fell, she joined them, the echoes of her own laughter merging with theirs. An old house stood at the end of a deserted lane, its weathered facade and broken windows whispering secrets of the past. Sarah inherited it from a distant relative, unaware of the sinister history woven into its foundation. On her first night, she heard faint whispers creeping through the floorboards, a sibilant murmur that curled around her like smoke. "Come closer," it beckoned. At first, she dismissed it as her imagination, tired from the day's labor of unpacking. But as darkness engulfed the home, the whispers grew bolder, each syllable laced with urgency. Curiosity gnawed at her, drawing her to the door that led to the unseen depths below. With a flickering flashlight, she descended the creaking steps, the air thick with a musty scent. Shadows danced along the damp walls as the whispers intensified, now forming words that chilled her to the bone. "Stay, forever." Heart racing, she turned to flee, but the darkness coiled tighter, holding her in place. In an instant, the whispers turned to laughter as she felt hands, cold and clammy, grasp her ankles, pulling her into the void. The house stood silent again, a new whisper joining the chorus beneath the floor, waiting for the next curious soul. The old house had stood empty for years, its peeling paint and cracked windows, telling stories of a past long forgotten. Sarah, a restless soul drawn to its mystery, decided to explore. The attic door creaked open, revealing a dusty, dimly lit space filled with old furniture and cobwebs. As she climbed the rickety stairs, a sudden flicker caught her eye. The lone bulb overhead sputtered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. She shook her head, attributing it to faulty wiring. Yet as the light flickered again, she felt an unshakable chill. The shadows morphed, twisting into vague, human-like shapes that seemed to implore her for help. Sarah's heart raced. She reached for the light switch, but the bulb flickered violently, plunging her into darkness. In that moment, whispers filled the air, desperate, pleading voices echoing her name. Panic surged through her as spectral figures began to materialize, faces twisted in anguish, trapped in their eternal limbo. Just as quickly, the light blazed back to life, leaving Sarah paralyzed in horror. In her reflection on the dusty attic mirror, she realized the last flicker had revealed their truth. They were not lost souls, but her own likeness, doomed to remain there, forever trapped in that light's haunting glow. In the old creaking house at the end of Miller Street, Clara always heard the whispers. At first, they were just faint murmurs, barely audible over the sound of her own breathing. She thought it was the wind, or perhaps the old pipes groaning in the cold. But as days turned into weeks, the whispers grew louder, weaving their way through her dreams, becoming impossible to ignore. They seemed to beckon her, drawing her closer to the walls. One night, Clara pressed her ear against the plaster, heart racing as the whispers became a chorus of desperate pleas. "Help us!" they cried, laced with a chilling urgency. Torn between fear and curiosity, she grabbed a hammer from the shed, the weight of it reassuring in her hands. With each strike, the wall crumbled, and a rush of stale air greeted her as she made a hole large enough to peek through. Inside, she glimpsed dark shapes, twisted forms, their mouths moving in silent agony. Panic washed over her as she realized these were no ordinary voices. They were trapped. But before she could retreat, the whispers turned to laughter, echoing endlessly as hands reached through the opening, pulling her into the darkness. The last thing she heard was her own voice, screaming for help, lost forever to the walls. As twilight cloaked the small town of Eldridge, a blood-red moon crested the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the streets. In their homes, the townsfolk felt an unsettling pull, an ancient urge awakening deep within them. Martha, the town's librarian, stared out her window, heart racing as whispers echoed in the night. They spoke of a hunger, a thirst for something more than sustenance. She dismissed it at first, but the rhythmic tapping at her door gnawed at her resolve. When she opened it, a man stood there, his eyes glinting with hunger, not for food, but for something darker. He stepped into her home, an unsettling warmth following him. "The moon," he breathed, "it calls to us." Martha backed away, the air thick with tension. As he approached, she realized the townsfolk were gathering outside, drawn like moths to the flame of their collective desire. They surged into her home, drawn by an insatiable need. As they embraced the man, their features shifted, becoming something monstrous yet familiar. In a chilling moment, she understood. The blood-red moon had awakened a forgotten hunger, one that would consume them all. Eldridge would never be the same. The moon hung low, casting a silvery glow over the old cemetery. Sarah wandered through the rows of weathered stones, drawn to a particular grave marked by a crumbling angel statue. As she approached, an unsettling sound pierced the night, a soft, muffled cry emanating from beneath the moss-covered stone. Heart racing, she knelt, peering closer, the cries growing louder and more desperate. Was someone buried alive? Panic gripped her as she called out, asking if anyone was there, if they needed help. The cries responded, a haunting echo that seemed to reach for her. Clenching her fists, she dug her fingers into the earth, feeling the cold soil give way. The cries grew frantic, urging her to continue, to unearth whatever lay beneath. With every handful of dirt thrown aside, dread curled in her stomach. Finally, she struck something solid. A box? She pried it open, expecting to find a trapped soul. Instead, a ghastly skull grinned back at her, blackened eyes wide with eternal horror. The cries halted abruptly, replaced by a whisper that sent chills down her spine. "You should have left me to rest." The ground trembled as the earth began to shift, pulling her in, and the whisper echoed, "Now you can cry too." The autumn sun hung low, casting an eerie glow over the fields as Thomas harvested his crops. This year, the yield was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Pumpkins, large and grotesque, thrived under the cracked earth. Their orange skins pulsed, almost alive, whispering secrets to the wind. Each evening, a chill crept through the village, filling it with an unsettling dread. Locals claimed the land had turned, cursed by an ancient spirit, but Thomas, driven by greed, ignored the warnings. As harvest neared its end, the pumpkins twisted into monstrous shapes. One night, he noticed a peculiar glow emanating from the largest one. Drawn to it, he reached out, and a voice slithered through the night, offering him wealth beyond imagination. "Feed me, and I shall grant your desires." Desperate to escape his debts, he agreed, not realizing the cost. The next dawn, villagers began to vanish, swallowed by the shadows that danced around the field. Thomas, now a slave to his own ambition, felt the ground tremble beneath him as the last scream echoed. The following harvest, the pumpkins returned, their skins smooth and inviting, waiting for the next fool to make a deal. Thomas, forever trapped, could only watch as his crops grew, feeding on the souls of the unwary. Clara inherited a delicate silver locket from her grandmother, its intricate designs whispering of an ancestral past. Ignoring her grandmother's cryptic warnings about the family curse, she wore it proudly. Strange occurrences began. Shadows flickered in the corners of her vision, and soft whispers echoed through her empty home. Each night, she dreamt of a woman, cloaked in darkness, beckoning her closer. Clara brushed it off as stress, convinced it was just her imagination. But the dreams grew more vivid, the woman's face haunting her waking hours. One stormy night, Clara awoke to find the locket cold against her chest. The whispers intensified, now a frantic chorus pleading for help. Heart racing, but she yanked it off and tossed it across the room. Silence fell, and in that stillness, she felt an icy breath at her ear. Curiosity got the best of her. She retrieved the locket, intending to unlock its secrets. As she opened it, a surge of energy coursed through her, and the shadows coalesced into a figure, the woman from her dreams. With a twisted smile, she whispered, "Thank you for freeing me." In an instant, Clara vanished, leaving only the locket that now bore her likeness, its clasp forever closed. In a dimly lit antique shop, a young woman named Clara stumbled upon a dusty tapestry hanging in the back. Intrigued by its intricate design, she reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers brushed the fabric, a shiver crawled up her spine. Unbeknownst to her, the tapestry was said to depict the gruesome fates of all who dared to lay hands upon it. Clara pulled back, but it was too late. The threads shimmered ominously, and she swore she saw the faces of those who had perished. A man with a twisted neck, a woman engulfed in flames, a child lost in a dark forest. Each image seemed to writhe, drawing her gaze deeper into the horror. Ignoring the growing dread, Clara hurried home. That night, she dreamt of the tapestry, each horrific scene flashing before her eyes. When she awoke, panic set in as she found the first image materializing in her life. The man with the broken neck, lying lifeless on her street. Days passed, and with each touch, the tapestry sealed her fate. The final scene was the worst, a mirror image of her own face, eyes wide in terror. As her reflection melted away in a haze of despair, Clara realized the tapestry didn't just predict doom, it claimed souls. And now it claimed hers. The air was thick with tension as Clara stepped into Dunlow Hollow, the sun dwindling into a crimson glow behind her. Locals warned her of the cursed whispers that danced in the wind at dusk, carrying tales of lost souls. She laughed it off, determined to unravel the mystery when she heard the first whisper, a soft, broken voice calling her name. Clara paused, her heart racing. Ignoring her instincts, she followed it into the trees, the shadows thickening around her. Each step deepened the chill, and the whispers grew louder, blending into an eerie chorus. "Stay with us," they beckoned. Panic set in as she stumbled upon a clearing where gnarled trees twisted like skeletal fingers, The whispers intensified, forming a cacophony of pleading voices. Clara turned to flee, but the shadows shifted, blocking her path. They danced menacingly, closing in. In her final moments, she realized the whispers held a sinister truth. They were not just echoes. They were the souls of those who had come before, forever trapped. As darkness enveloped her, Clara became one of them, her voice joining the whispers, forever luring in the next unsuspecting soul. Clara lay in her bed, the clock ticking towards midnight, a faint light from the street seeping through the curtains. Suddenly, a soft creaking broke the silence, each groan of the floorboards sending shivers down her spine. She froze, straining her ears. The sound was unmistakable. Footsteps, deliberate and slow, inching closer. Her heart raced as the noise echoed through the darkened room, and she pulled the covers tighter around her. "It's just the house settling," she whispered to herself, yet the footsteps persisted. With every creak, Clara felt an icy dread seep into her bones. She dared a glance to the foot of her bed, but the darkness obscured everything. The footsteps paused. Something was there, just out of sight. The air grew thick, stifling her breath as she felt an overwhelming urge to scream, but no sound emerged. Then the footsteps resumed, now directly beside her bed. Clara's heart pounded in her ears. The bed shifted, and she felt a cold breath against her face, whispering words she couldn't understand. In that moment, she understood there was no one there but her. The darkness had come alive, and she was never truly alone. In the dim light of dusk, Clara dusted off the old portrait that had hung in her grandmother's attic for decades. Its once vibrant colors now dulled. The painting depicted a serene woman, her eyes hauntingly lifelike. Clara felt an inexplicable pull toward it, but as she leaned closer, the air chilled and the shadows deepened around her. The woman's smile, once benign, seemed to twist into something sinister, as if she were beckoning Clara to step closer. Suddenly, Clara noticed a small inscription hidden in the frame. "To see is to know." Intrigued, she leaned in even more. The woman's gaze shifted, locking onto Clara with a knowing intensity that made her skin crawl. Heart pounding, she stumbled back, but the portrait glowed with an eerie light. The room began to pulse with a strange energy. Clara gasped as the woman in the painting began to move, lips parting to reveal a whisper that echoed through the attic. "You should never have uncovered my truth." Just then, Clara felt a sharp pain in her chest, collapsing onto the floor. The last thing she saw was the painting transforming. The woman's smirk, now a gaping maw, devouring the light around her. In an attic overshadowed by cobwebs, Claire discovered an antique doll, its glassy eyes shimmering with an uncanny allure. She brought it into her room, ignoring the whispers of her friends, who warned her of its cursed reputation. Every night she felt its gaze upon her, a prickling sensation that stirred unease deep within. One evening, as a storm raged, she decided to confront her fears. Standing before the doll, Claire demanded, "What do you want from me?" The doll's expression remained fixed, yet the air grew thick with a sense of foreboding. Suddenly, a flicker of lightning illuminated its face, and a chilling voice echoed in her mind, "I show you the truth." A vision surged through Claire, a glimpse of her own lifeless body, a shadowy figure standing over her. Heart racing, she stumbled back, her mind swirling with dread. Frantically, she searched for the source of the apparition, but the room was empty. Days passed, and the doll's watchful stare haunted her dreams. Then one night, Claire awoke to find the doll gone. Panic gripped her as she raced to the attic, only to find the doll perched atop her bed. In a cold whisper, it revealed its final vision, her own funeral, the shadow now smiling. As Claire gasped in horror, she realized she was just a pawn in its game, her fate sealed by its gaze. Eli had always been passionate about gardening, nurturing vibrant flowers and lush vegetables in his backyard. But this year, he stumbled upon an unusual plant at an obscure nursery, a stunning vine with deep crimson blooms. The owner warned him it was temperamental, but Eli couldn't resist its allure. He named it Bloodroot. Soon he noticed odd occurrences. His plants thrived unnaturally, growing larger and more vibrant than ever. But the garden's beauty masked something sinister. One evening, Eli returned to find the bloodroot vine coiling disturbingly around the garden's edge. Its flowers were now a deep, unsettling red, almost pulsating. The next morning, he discovered a small, deep cut on his hand. As he tended to his plants, he saw the bloodroot twitching, as though it sensed his blood. Chills ran down his spine. Ignoring his instincts, Eli pricked his finger and let a drop of blood fall. The moment it hit the soil, the vine surged, petals unfurling greedily. Alarmed, Eli tried to yank it from the ground, but it held on fiercely. Panic swelled as he realized the truth. His beloved plants hungered for more than water. As he fell, the garden drank deeply, and Eli's screams were swallowed by the blooming darkness. The fields were alive with golden wheat, swaying gently in the breeze, a sight that brought tears to Isaac's eyes. This year's harvest was the best he'd ever seen, enough to secure his family's future. But whispers floated through the village. Everyone had heard the stories of the old ground that fed on blood, a soil that flourished only when fed by darkness. He brushed it aside, convinced that his hard work had earned this bounty. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Isaac noticed something unsettling. The crops seemed to thrum with a pulse, a heartbeat beneath the earth. That night, he heard it. Distant, muffled cries echoing from the fields, as if the land itself lamented. In desperation, he ventured out, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. There, in the moonlight, he saw figures emerging, shadowy forms writhing among the stalks. Panic surged, but it was too late. The ground beneath him opened like a maw, pulling him down, the cries crescendoing into a deafening roar. Isaac realized with horror that the harvest required its due, life for life. As the last light faded, the fields thrived, their thirst quenched, and the village awaited another season of abundance, unaware of the price paid under the harvest moon. The sound of water splashing filled the small bathroom as Jenna stepped into the shower, steam rising and enveloping her in warmth. Alone in her apartment, she let the water wash away the day's stress. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper, barely discernible over the rushing water. She paused, straining to listen, but it faded into silence. Dismissing it as her imagination, she resumed her shower, only for the whisper to return, clearer this time, almost a call of her name. Jenna, it beckoned, echoing eerily within the tiled walls. Her heart raced as she turned off the faucet, the sudden silence deafening. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. No response, just the dripping of water. Cautiously, she stepped out, wrapping herself in a towel, her eyes darting around. The mirror fogged up, but through the mist, she saw something shift, a darker shadow lurking just behind the glass. She wiped the mirror with her hand, revealing her own reflection. But in the moment, she felt the brush of cold fingers on her shoulder. Whirling around, she was met with nothing, but the whisper returned, now sinister. "You called for me, Jenna." And then silence. Her scream echoed, but it was swallowed whole, as if the bathroom itself consumed her terror. In the dim light of an attic, Sarah discovered an ornate music box, its surface adorned with intricate carvings of sorrowful faces. Curiosity piqued, she wound the key, and a haunting melody filled the air, chilling her to the bone. As the notes danced, shadows flickered at the edge of her vision, whispering secrets of the forgotten. With each note, the temperature dropped, and the room grew darker, as if the music was pulling something from the depths of the house. Sarah's heart raced, but she couldn't stop listening. Suddenly, the melody warped, intertwining with faint cries and echoes of long-lost souls. The faces on the box seemed to animate, their expressions twisted in agony. A cold breeze swept through the attic, and the air thickened with despair. Each haunting note beckoned her, a siren song that made her feel lightheaded and desperate. In an instant, the music stopped, leaving an oppressive silence. Sarah felt a presence behind her, cold breath on her neck. She turned, but there was nothing. Only the music box, now eerily still. As she backed away, she heard a whisper, "You've called us." The weight of countless souls pressed upon her, and the box clicked shut, sealing her fate. Now she was one of them, forever trapped in a cursed melody. It started with a dusty old photograph found in the attic. Sarah was drawn to it, a faded image of a girl about her age, sitting beneath a gnarled oak tree. The girl's smile was unsettling, her eyes too bright. Intrigued, Sarah decided to hang it in her bedroom, a conversation starter for her friends. That night, she dreamt vividly of the girl, waking up in a cold sweat, the echo of laughter still ringing in her ears. Days passed, and every night the dreams intensified. The girl would beckon to Sarah, whispering secrets, urging her to join her beneath a tree. Compelled by a mix of fear and fascination, Sarah visited the old oak in the woods. As she approached, the air grew cold, and shadows danced around her. The tree felt alive, pulsating as if it had a heartbeat. Suddenly, she recognized the spot from the photograph, the very place where the girl once sat. With a chill, she noticed the ground was freshly disturbed. Digging with her hands, she unearthed a rusted locket. Inside was a photograph of herself. Startled, Sarah looked around and the girl stood behind her, faint and spectral. "Why did you leave me?" she asked, her smile fading. In that moment, the world around her blurred, leaving only the whisper of roots pulling her down. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest, Jake stumbled upon an ancient lantern half buried in the dirt. Its glass was cracked, but a faint glow emanated from within. Curiosity piqued, he picked it up, feeling an inexplicable pull to ignite its flame. He struck a match, and the lantern flared to life, illuminating the path that twisted deeper into the woods. Against his better judgment, he followed the light, drawn by an unseen force. The moment he stepped off the familiar trail, the air grew cold, an unnatural chill wrapping around him. The glow flickered, revealing glimpses of twisted trees and shadows that seemed to slither away from the light. Then, he heard whispers, soft yet urgent, calling his name. Panic surged in his chest. He turned to flee, but the path behind him vanished, swallowed by fog. The whispers intensified, surrounding him, each voice laden with dread. In the lantern's flickering light, he saw faces, lost souls, their eyes wide with terror. A jolt of realization struck him. He was not the first to find the lantern. The ground beneath him crumbled, and he was pulled towards the darkness, joining the voices. The lantern extinguished, leaving the woods silent once more. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah fiddled with the ancient radio she had discovered in an abandoned shack. It crackled to life, emitting a faint static before an unsettling voice broke through. "Help us. We are trapped." The disembodied plea sent shivers down her spine. Ignoring the instinct to turn away, she adjusted the frequency, eager to uncover the source of the haunting message. The voice grew clearer, detailing a place filled with sorrow, where the townsfolk had vanished without a trace. Each word felt like a call from the beyond, drawing her deeper into the chilling tale. With a mix of anticipation and dread, she decided to follow the coordinates mentioned in the broadcast. Arriving at the desolate location, she found nothing but crumbling foundations and overgrown weeds. Yet the radio continued to relay the desperate cries for help. Suddenly, the air turned electric. Shadows danced around her, whispering secrets of the lost. Heart racing, she realized the truth. The spirits of the town were trapped, seeking a conduit to freedom. In a final act of desperation, the radio crackled one last time. "Join us, forever." Then silence. Sarah became the last voice heard on that cursed frequency, her plea for help swallowed by the void. Late at night, Sarah sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, the silence punctuated only by the hum of her refrigerator. Her phone rang, a harsh sound breaking the stillness. Glancing at the screen, she froze. It was her sister, Emily, who had died in a car accident 6 months ago. Heart pounding, she hesitated before answering, the weight of grief clawing at her throat. "Hello?" she managed to whisper. On the other end, a voice that was unmistakably Emily's spoke softly. "Sarah, I need your help. I'm trapped." Terror washed over her. It couldn't be her sister. It must be a trick. But the desperation in the voice was real, sending chills down her spine. "Where are you?" she gasped. "In the woods, where we used to play. Please, hurry." The line crackled, and the call dropped. With shaking hands, Sarah grabbed her jacket and rushed out, the chilling night air swallowing her whole. As she reached the woods, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. It was Emily, looking just as she had before her death, but her eyes were hollow. "You shouldn't have come, Sarah," she whispered, revealing a sinister grin. Realization hit. She hadn't answered a call for help, but a summons to join her in the dark beyond. The flickering light cast a ghostly glow over the abandoned ward, long forgotten by the world outside. Distant echoes of laughter turned into hollow whispers, swirling around Clara as she stepped cautiously through the dust-laden hall. Once a place of healing, it now lay shrouded in an unsettling silence. She was drawn here, compelled by an inexplicable urge to uncover its secrets. As she crossed the threshold into the main room, her heart raced. The faint scent of antiseptic lingered, mingling with the musty air. A single bed remained, its sheets yellowed and frayed, as if someone had just risen from it. Clara's breath caught in her throat when she noticed a name tag pinned to the pillow. Patient 47. Suddenly, a low groan echoed from the shadows. Clara turned, her pulse quickening. "Is anyone there?" she called, her voice trembling. The groan morphed into a soft, almost pleading sound. Driven by morbid curiosity, she stepped deeper into the darkness. Then she saw them, sunken eyes staring back from the corner. "Help me," they whispered, a skeletal hand reaching out. "I'm the last patient." But as Clara rushed to the figure, the lights flickered back on, revealing the truth. She was alone, and the last patient was her own reflection in the glass, a warning from the hollow remains. Lila sat alone in the dim light of her room, engrossed in her book, the quiet of the house surrounding her like a heavy blanket. Suddenly, a soft whisper cut through the silence. Her name, Lila. The sound came from the hallway, an empty space she had long avoided. Heart racing, she rose, straining to hear over the pounding of her pulse. "Lila," it called again, the voice faint yet unmistakable. Compelled by a mix of dread and curiosity, she stepped toward the darkened corridor. With each step, she felt a chill creep up her spine. As she approached the source, the whisper grew stronger, more insistent, echoing off the walls. Clutching her flashlight, Lila entered the room at the end of the hall, one she hadn't entered since her brother's disappearance a year ago. Dust motes danced in the narrow beam, revealing old toys and forgotten memories. Then, there it was again, clearer than before. "Lila!" Her breath quickened. The room felt alive with an energy that prickled her skin. Just as she turned to flee, the door slammed shut behind her, locking her in. Panic surged as the whisper turned to laughter, chilling her to the core. "I've been waiting for you," it said, revealing the truth of her brother's fate. Lila was not alone anymore. As the moon cast a ghostly glow over the neglected grounds, Harold settled into his usual spot beneath the gnarled oak tree. The chill of the night wrapped around him, but he was used to this lonely watch. He'd cared for the old estate for decades, keeping it from falling into complete decay. Yet tonight felt different. An unsettling rustle broke the silence, sending a shiver down his spine. He glanced at the weathered stone markers, their inscriptions worn and faded, but nothing stirred in the shadows. Just the wind, he told himself. Another crack echoed, louder this time, and he squinted into the darkness. Was someone there? A fleeting shadow danced just beyond the flickering lantern light. Heart racing, he rose, peering into the abyss of the twisted branches. The air thickened with a heavy dread. A whisper brushed against his ear, chilling his blood. "Stay." "Forever." It hissed. Panicking, he stumbled back, the lantern crashing to the ground, extinguishing the light. In the suffocating darkness, cold fingers wrapped around his throat. The last thing he saw was the twisted tree, now holding him as part of its eternal vigil, forever watching over the silent graves. In the dim light of her room, Clara gazed at her new toy, a porcelain figure with delicate features and a painted smile that seemed too wide. Her mother had found it at a dusty thrift shop, claiming it was a treasure. But Clara felt an unsettling chill each time she looked at it. As night fell, shadows crept along the walls, elongating the figure's silhouette. Suddenly, she heard a soft giggle, high and sweet, echoing in the silence. Clara sat up, heart pounding. It was late. Her parents were asleep. Unnerved, she turned on her lamp, but the light flickered, casting eerie shapes that danced around the room. The giggle came again, more pronounced this time. Clara felt the urge to check on the doll. With trembling hands, she reached for it, and as she did, the giggle morphed into a low, haunting laugh. Eyes wide, Clara stumbled backward. The doll's smile twisted, revealing teeth that were sharp and glistening. It lunged, the porcelain cracking as it moved with unnatural speed. Clara screamed, but it was swallowed by the night. The next morning, her parents found the doll, pristine and still, sitting on her bed while Clara was nowhere to be seen. In the dim light of the attic, Clara found the portrait covered in dust, its frame ornate but weathered. She brushed off the grime, revealing a man in a dark suit, eyes piercing and unsettling. That night, sleep eluded her. Something was off. Every time she glanced at the painting, the man seemed different, his mouth curling into a smile that sent shivers down her spine. Clara decided to document the changes, convinced her mind was playing tricks. Each morning the expression shifted, an angry scowl one day, a sorrowful frown the next. The final change came on the night of the storm. Thunder rumbled as she lay in bed, heart racing, peeking at the portrait. The man now looked directly at her, his expression a twisted mix of rage and despair. Hypnotized, she stepped closer, the air crackling with tension. Suddenly the lights flickered and the attic plunged into darkness. Clara trembled, her breath shallow. When the lights returned, the man was gone. The portrait now just a canvas of swirling colors. But in the reflection of Clara's terrified eyes, she saw him standing behind her, a thin smile stretching across his face, whispering her name. The old pond had long been forgotten, overgrown with weeds and surrounded by twisted trees. Locals whispered of strange happenings, but Rachel, seeking solitude, dismissed the tales. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she approached the water's edge. The surface was unnaturally still, reflecting the darkening sky with a glass-like clarity. As Rachel peered closer, her own reflection smiled back, a smile she didn't make. Heart pounding, she stepped back, her breath quickening. The air grew heavy and cold, the fading light casting eerie shadows around her. She turned to run, but froze as the reflection moved independently, stepping out of the water as she stumbled backward. It wore her face, yet bore an unsettling malice in its eyes. "You've always been so lonely," it whispered, echoing her deepest fears. Just as Rachel opened her mouth to scream, the figure lunged forward. In an instant, she was pulled into the depths, her own reflection now free to roam the world above, an endless cycle of despair. The pond lay undisturbed, its surface glimmering with the last light of day, hiding the truth beneath the water, waiting for the next curious soul. As twilight settled, Anna wandered deeper into the dense underbrush, drawn by an inexplicable pull. The air thickened, and the vibrant colors of the forest faded into a dull gray. Suddenly, she stumbled upon a hidden clearing, illuminated by flickering torches. The scene before her sent shivers down her spine. Clad in dark robes, figures encircled a stone altar, chanting in a language she could not understand. A chilling dread wrapped around her heart as she watched, frozen by terror. The center of the altar held something grotesque, a small creature bound and writhing in agony. The robed figures raised their arms, their chants growing louder, more frenzied. Anna's instincts screamed at her to flee, yet she felt anchored to the spot, as if unseen tendrils were holding her fast. Then one of the figures turned, locking eyes with her. The hood fell back, revealing a familiar face. Her own. The realization sent her heart racing. She was staring at a twisted reflection of herself. The chanting intensified, now echoing her name, and she understood too late. The ritual demanded a sacrifice, and she was the chosen one. As her doppelganger smiled wickedly, Anna's scream was swallowed by the darkness surrounding her, leaving only the whisper of the trees behind. Every evening, Clara passed by the antique mirror she inherited, its surface cracked but still mesmerizing. One night, as the moonlight danced across the shards, she caught a glimpse of something unusual, a version of herself in the reflection, one that smiled back. She froze, her heart racing. The smile was wide, unsettling, unlike her norm. Clara blinked, and the image remained, unblinking. "Hello, Clara," it whispered, though her lips never moved. Fear gripped her, yet curiosity prevailed. What was this strange being? A trick of the light? She leaned closer, studying the sinister smile. The room grew colder. Clara felt an inexplicable pull, and before she knew it, she placed her hand on the glass. An icy shock coursed through her body, and the reflection stretched out a hand toward her. It was all too real. Panic surged as Clara yanked her hand back, but the reflection stepped forward, shattering the mirror entirely. Glass splintered around her, yet in the chaos, she saw the smiling version stepping into her world. It whispered one last time, "I've always wanted to be you." Clara's scream echoed, silenced by a haunting stillness as her reflection took her place, grinning into the darkness. Every night, as dusk painted the room in shadows, a rhythmic tapping echoed from above. Sarah brushed it off at first, attributing the noise to the ancient plumbing of her new home. But as the nights wore on, the taps grew louder, more insistent. They began to intrude on her dreams, twisting into a sinister melody that whispered her name. One evening, unable to endure it any longer, Sarah climbed the creaky staircase, her heart pounding in sync with the ominous rhythm. Each step felt heavier, as if the house itself was warning her to turn back. At the top, she pressed her ear against the door beneath the sloped roof. The sound was now frantic, a chorus of desperate knocks pleading to be heard. Gathering her courage, she flung the door open. The room lay empty, dust motes swirling like ghosts in the dim light. But as she turned to leave, a cold breeze swept past her, carrying a soft voice that echoed the taps, now directly behind her. "Let me out," it sighed, chilling her to the bone. Sarah stumbled back, realizing with horror the taps were not just sounds. They were a cry from a dark past, and she would never escape their grasp. In a small, forgotten town, Sarah heard it for the first time, a soft, rhythmic ticking. It echoed through her empty home, a sound that seemed so out of place in the quiet stillness. She dismissed it as an old clock somewhere, though she had never owned one. As the days passed, the ticking grew louder, more insistent, reverberating through her bones. It kept her up at night, clawing at her sanity. She started to see shadows flitting just out of sight, and her dreams became haunted by visions of a dark figure standing at the foot of her bed, watching her. One evening, desperation led her to explore her home, searching for the source of the noise. With each step, the ticking grew louder, almost thunderous, pushing her heart to race. Entering the basement, she stumbled upon a dusty old trunk. The ticking throbbed in her ears, relentless. With trembling hands, she pried it open. Inside lay a heart, still beating, encased in glass, its rhythm synchronized with the ominous ticking. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a figure, whispering her name. The heart was hers, a cursed remnant of a life she had forgotten, and now it demanded to be free, dragging her into eternal darkness. Sarah had always loved her secluded cabin in the woods, a place where she could escape the chaos of city life. One rainy night, a storm knocked out the power, leaving her alone in darkness. As thunder rumbled, she heard a faint knock at the door. Thinking it was a stray hiker, she hesitated before opening it. To her surprise, no one stood outside, only the howling wind and the eerie darkness enveloping her. Dismissing it as her imagination, she returned to the flickering candlelight. Moments later, the knocking returned, louder and more insistent. Heart racing, she approached the door again, only to find it ajar. Pushing it open revealed nothing but the rain-soaked porch. Turning back inside, she felt a chill creep up her spine. Suddenly, the furniture shifted slightly, as if someone had been there, but she was alone. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, whispering her name in a voice that felt foreign yet familiar. Frantically, she grabbed her phone, but it flickered and died. In that moment, the air thickened, and the whispers grew louder. A dark figure emerged from the shadows, grinning with a chilling familiarity. It wasn't a stranger, it was her reflection, and it wanted to stay. It was a late night when Sarah slid into her car, the familiar scent of old leather wrapping around her like a blanket. She was exhausted after a long shift, and the thought of driving home alone sent chills down her spine. As she turned the key, the engine roared to life, its sound echoing in the stillness of the empty parking lot. Suddenly, a fleeting shadow crossed her rearview mirror. She dismissed it, attributing it to fatigue. But as she drove, an unsettling sensation crept in. She felt watched. Glancing back, she saw the backseat was empty, yet the feeling intensified. Every red light became a trial as she nervously tapped her fingers on the steering wheel. Then she heard it, a soft whisper, so faint she almost missed it. "Turn around." Her heart raced. With no one in sight, she pressed on, but the whisper grew louder, now a desperate plea. Panic surged within her, and she turned sharply into a deserted alley. The whisper stopped. In a moment of dread-filled silence, she looked back one last time. A figure emerged, pale and twisted, eyes glinting with malice. Sarah's breath hitched as she realized she was never truly alone. The unseen passenger was waiting. As the sun dipped behind the vast expanse of pines, Clara felt an unsettling chill creep along her spine. She had wandered deeper into the woods than intended, lured by the fading light and the allure of solitude. The trees towered above her like ancient sentinels, their dark silhouettes stretching ominously in the twilight. Just as she turned to retrace her steps, a soft whisper floated through the air. "Stay," it beckoned, hauntingly familiar yet chilling. Clara froze, scanning the shadows. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. Panic surged as she realized it echoed her name. There was no one around. Heart racing, she spun around, the whisper now becoming a cacophony of voices that seemed to surround her. The trees began to sway, their branches twisting in grotesque shapes as if trying to reach her. With every breath, the air thickened, suffocating her resolve. She turned in desperation, only to find a figure standing in the distance, shrouded in darkness. It raised a hand, beckoning her closer. The last thing she heard before everything went black was her own voice, pleading, "Help me." But the silence that followed was deafening. In a remote village, a gnarled tree stood at the edge of the forest, its branches twisting like skeletal fingers. The villagers spoke in hushed tones of the strange occurrences surrounding it. The whispers, the rustling leaves, the shadows that danced when the sun sank. One autumn evening, driven by a mix of curiosity and bravado, a boy named Sam ventured toward the tree, convinced the stories were mere superstition. As he approached, the air grew heavy, a chill crawling up his spine. He felt eyes upon him, but when he turned, only the tree loomed, its bark dark and knotted. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through, and the branches creaked ominously. A voice, low and gravelly, seemed to echo from within the tree, calling his name. Heart racing, Sam stumbled back but found his feet rooted to the ground. The tree's branches twisted closer, wrapping around him like a cocoon. In the morning, the villagers found nothing but a pile of leaves. The tree remained ever watchful, and on quiet nights, if you listened closely, you could hear a boy's laughter mingled with the wind, forever trapped within its grasp. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the dense thicket. Emma felt a chill wrap around her as she ventured deeper into the woods, searching for her son, Timmy. He had wandered off during their afternoon hike, chasing after a fleeting butterfly. Panic clawed at her throat when she heard it, a soft, childlike voice calling her name. "Mommy?" it whispered, echoing through the trees. Emma's heart raced. Could it be Timmy? She followed the sound, the voice growing clearer, more insistent. "Mommy, help me!" It seemed to come from just beyond a gnarled oak. As she approached, the air turned colder, and the wind picked up, swirling leaves around her. "Stay close, Timmy," she shouted, but the voice laughed, a high-pitched mocking sound. It was not her son. Panic surged, and she turned to flee, but the ground beneath her shifted. Roots snaked out, wrapping around her ankles, holding her in place. The voice now surrounded her, taunting, echoing in the darkness. With a final desperate scream, Emma understood. The woods didn't want her to leave. The last thing she heard was Timmy's voice fading, replaced by a chorus of children laughing, forever lost in the dark. The town of Eldridge had always been quiet, but on that fateful night an unnatural haze crept in, thick as if it were alive. Residents peered through their windows, dread pooling in their stomachs as the whispers began. Soft and melodic, they called out names, beckoning to the lonely souls inside. Clara, a widow, felt a chill wash over her as she heard her late husband's voice, sweet and familiar, drifting through the veil. "Come to me, Clara," it urged, laced with a seductive promise of reunion. As she stepped outside, the fog enveloped her, wrapping around her like an embrace. The world faded into shadow and her senses dulled, the whispers growing louder. One by one, her neighbors joined her, entranced by familiar voices, all drifting into the fog. Hours later, the mist began to clear, leaving the streets eerily silent. In the town square, only Clara stood, staring blankly into the void. The whispers were gone, replaced by an unsettling silence. She found herself alone, her heart sinking as realization hit. The voices had lured her friends into the fray, and now only their vacant homes remained. As she turned to leave, she heard her own voice call out soft and sweet from within the haze, urging her to join them. The sun dipped behind the hills as Sarah trekked along the forgotten trail, her boots crunching on gravel. An ancient burial mound loomed ahead, its surface covered in twisted roots and shadowy flora. Drawn by an inexplicable urge, she approached, her heart racing with both trepidation and curiosity. That's when she heard it, a faint whisper, like a breeze rustling through dry leaves. "Help us." The voice, soft yet urgent, echoed from within the mound. Sarah hesitated, the hairs on her neck standing upright. Perhaps it was the wind, she thought. But the call grew clearer, laced with desperation. "We are lost." Unease gripped her, yet she crouched, peering into the dark crevice. The whisper transformed into a cacophony of cries, beckoning her closer. An overwhelming impulse surged. She must uncover the truth. As she reached inside, the ground trembled beneath her. Suddenly, a skeletal hand shot out, gripping her wrist with icy fingers. The whispers intensified, revealing the trapped souls of those who had once been buried there, cursed to seek a savior. Panic surged as the mound began to shift, and Sarah realized with horror that she was the next offering, forever to join their haunting chorus. The sun dipped low, casting shadows over the jagged cliffs as Mia hiked alone, her breath visible in the crisp air. The trail, once lively with laughter on the weekends, now felt abandoned, echoing only her footsteps. She paused at the precipice, the valley below swallowing the fading light. That's when she heard it, a soft, pleading voice weaving through the wind. "Help me, please help me." Chills raced down her spine. She squinted into the dusk, convinced it was a trick of her mind. Ignoring the growing dread, she edged closer, peering into the darkness. "Is someone there?" Mia called, her voice shaking. The whispering intensified, swirling around her, pleading for salvation. Panic gripped her heart, yet her feet betrayed her, inching toward the edge. Suddenly, a figure emerged, a distorted silhouette, arms outstretched. "You're too late," it hissed, echoing her own voice. The realization crashed over her. There was no one to save. The whispers crescendoed. As she stumbled back, the ground crumbled beneath her. Plummeting into the void, Mia understood too late. The cliff wasn't just a forsaken place. It was a trap for the lost, always seeking the next soul to join the chorus. The old house at the end of Maple Street had long been forgotten, its windows shattered and walls sagging under the weight of neglect. Locals whispered about the basement, where shadows danced and soft whispers echoed in the still air. One night, driven by curiosity and a dare, Jake and his friends descended the creaking stairs, flashlights flickering. The air turned heavy, every breath a struggle against the oppressive silence. As they reached the bottom, the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of lost voices. "Help us! Help us!" They followed the sound, stepping cautiously among broken furniture and dust-covered relics. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept past them, extinguishing their lights. Panic set in, and they fumbled in the darkness, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. A figure appeared, barely discernible, with hollow eyes and an outstretched hand. Jake's friends screamed and ran, but he froze, trapped in a gaze that promised escape from the mundane. The whispers grew frantic. "Stay with us!" In that moment, the basement seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The door slammed shut, locking Jake inside. Days later, the house stood silent again, and the whispers faded into the wind. But those who dared to listen knew that a new voice had joined the chorus, forever echoing from the forgotten basement. The villagers always warned against approaching the old well. Its stones were slick with moss and history, a relic of a time best forgotten. One stormy night, curious and reckless, Clara found herself drawn to it. Thunder rumbled and the wind howled as she peered into the black void below. Her breath quickened, but something flickered in the depths, an echo of a voice, faint and pleading. "Help me," it whispered, sending shivers down her spine. Clara felt a compulsion, a pull stronger than fear. She grabbed a rusted bucket, lowering it into the well, the creaking rope breaking the night's silence. The bucket splashed, and with it, a chilling gust of wind erupted, extinguishing her lantern. Darkness enveloped her, and the voice grew louder. "You shouldn't have come," it echoed. Heart-racking, Clara pulled the bucket back up, but it wasn't empty. Inside lay a matted tangle of hair and a small, rotting hand. Panic surged as she stumbled back, realizing the truth. This was the fate of those who vanished, swallowed by the well. The whispers transformed into laughter. As she turned to flee, the darkness coiled around her, the well's curse wrapping tight, forever binding her to the secrets hidden beneath the surface. Evelyn had always heard tales of the woods, whispers of lost souls and shadows that danced just beyond the trees. But as dusk fell on her hike, curiosity outweighed caution. The air turned thick, the trees closing in like a secretive embrace. She felt it then, a soft whisper, almost like her name, carried on a chilling breeze. With heart racing, she turned, only to find nothing but shadows shifting in the underbrush. Compelled, she followed the sound deeper into the thicket, each step muffled by a carpet of leaves. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Stay with us," they beckoned. The moonlight barely pierced the canopy, casting twisted silhouettes that seemed to watch her every move. Suddenly, a figure emerged, an ethereal woman, eyes hollow yet pleading. Evelyn froze, entranced. "Help me," the figure whispered, reaching out. But the moment she touched the woman's cold hand, the world around her dissolved. In a blink, Evelyn stood alone, surrounded by the same twisted trees, now echoing with laughter. The whispers were gone, replaced by a chilling realization. She had joined the lost, another soul ensnared by the forest, eternally whispering her own name to the next curious wanderer. Tom stood at the entrance of the silent chapel, a crumbling relic hidden deep in the woods. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, warning that anyone who entered would not return the same. Ignoring their warnings, he stepped inside, the air thick with dust and the scent of decay. Moonlight spilled through shattered stained glass, illuminating the altar where faded relics lay forgotten. As he explored, an unsettling chill crept along his spine, whispers echoing in the silence. He dismissed them as wind, but they grew louder, insistent. "Leave this place," they urged. Curious, he approached the altar, noticing an ornate box covered in cobwebs. Heart racing, he opened it, revealing a dusty, ancient tome. The moment he touched the pages, the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of tormented voices. Tom felt a cold hand grip his shoulder, fingers icy against his skin. He spun around, but the chapel was empty. Panicked, he fled, but the door slammed shut. Trapped, he turned back to the altar, where shadows pooled, forming dark shapes. They laughed softly, a sound more chilling than any scream. The last thing Tom saw was the book snapping shut, sealing his fate within the silent chapel forever. The scent of old paper wafted through the dim aisles of the abandoned library. Sarah had always been drawn to its eerie charm, but tonight a chill settled deep in her bones. She entered, the heavy door creaking ominously behind her. Shadows flickered in the flickering lights, and she felt eyes watching her. The whispers began as she wandered deeper, soft at first, like a breeze rustling pages. "Help us," they seemed to plead, echoing from the shelves. Intrigued yet unsettled, Sarah approached a desk where a strange, dusty tome lay open. The strange symbols seemed to writhe under her fingers. Suddenly, the whispers crescendoed, turning into a cacophony of cries. Panic surged within her, yet she couldn't look away. A cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the lights. In the darkness, she felt a presence beside her, breath hot against her ear. "Join us," it hissed. Heart racing, she dropped the book, but the whispers transformed into laughter. The doors slammed shut, sealing her inside. Days later, locals would hear her voice among the stacks, forever repeating the same desperate plea. The library, always hungry, had claimed another soul.